So we just finished the week of, in the counting of the Omer, we finished the week of Tiferes, which is compassion. Now what follows tonight when we count the Omer, we're going to go into the week of Netzach. Now Netzach means persistence. It's called victory. But what it means is that whatever we are meant to do in kindness and in judgment and in compassion, there has to be a persistence. There has to be a consistency, a determination that these things happen even when we're not in the mood. So the kindness has to happen even when we're not in the mood, when we don't have inspired kindness. And judgment, discipline, has to happen even when we're not inspired to discipline. And compassion has to happen even if we're a little exhausted from the compassion. So Netzach gives the other emotions a stability and a reliability. You're going to be kind even when you're not in the mood. So you're not fickle. And you're going to be disciplined even when you're not in the mood. You're predictable. You're reliable. That's physiologically associated with the leg. The leg gives you your stability. You have a leg to stand on. So if the right arm is your kindness, your right leg is your netzach, the stability, the reliability, the permanence of the emotion. It also is a little bit more geared towards action. If it's not the inspiration of kindness, it's the consistency in the act of kindness. So for example, we used to be friends a long time ago. We've drifted apart. We're not as close as we used to be, but I'm going to be kind to you because of old time sake, because of a commitment we once made. In other words, the action is going to happen even when the feeling is not so much there. That's what gives us our sanity, really. Because love and hate and compassion, that gives us the excitement. That's high energy stuff. It doesn't always translate into action. Netzach and the emotions that follow is more action-oriented. It's geared towards performance. So if you have just chesed, you may not do anything loving, you may not do anything kind, because it's the feeling that's important, not the action that comes from it. So what moves us from our feeling to action? Netzach. So you might say that Netzach is kindness or love applied to behavior. So here's the picture that we get. You have things in your mind. You know what's right. You know what's good. You know what's wrong. You know what's bad. Does that mean that you're going to love what's good and hate what's bad? Not necessarily. There's a transition there. To go from the cerebral to the emotional, you got to get past certain limitations. How do you translate what you know into what you feel? I know I should love my spouse. I wish I did, but the heart just doesn't respond. Where it says in Chassidus The ideas in your head have to reach your heart, but the narrowness of the neck, it's a bottleneck. It doesn't let the information from the head reach the heart. In other words, what you know in your mind has to be so vivid and so clear and so convincing that even the heart can't ignore it. Also, the heart has to be responsive and sensitive to what the brain is saying, but if it's callous, if it's jaded, then your mind can't move or inspire your heart. So that transition takes a little doing. How do you go from knowing it's right to loving it? How do you know from knowing that it's bad to hating it? If we successfully do that, and we have inspired feelings, we love and judge and have compassion properly, now there's another bottleneck. How do you go from emotion to performance? You know, people say, if you really loved me, you would have done me the favor. That's not necessarily correct. Real love is an emotion, and it's an exciting emotion, and it's a pleasant emotion. So if I feel like I really, really love you, that's wonderful. That's it. I'm satisfied. That gives me a lot of pleasure. What am I doing about it? Why do I have to do anything? I like love, or discipline, or compassion. I remember hearing this little story from a very special man, a shliach in California. His father lived through the Depression in the 30s. And he told me once about how special his father was. They were standing in line for some handout or something where they're going to get some rations. It was a long line. And his father was standing there talking to a few of his friends. And a man came over and said, "Can anybody help me? I haven't eaten anything in days." And the people all said, "Oh, we feel so bad for you." I mean, nobody had any, everybody was hungry. And they all said, "We feel so bad for you." And this shliach's father said, "I also feel bad for you. In fact, I feel $2 worth of bad for you." And he gave him $2. There's a difference between the friends and this man's father. The friends sincerely, genuinely felt bad for this man. They empathized, they sympathized, they hurt for him. It never occurred to them to reach into their pocket and give away whatever little bit they had. This man's father didn't understand compassion without action. In other words, he had netzach. That's what netzach does. Netzach is the ability to translate a feeling into a doing, or at least a speaking. Sometimes you love someone and you don't even say it. Sometimes you feel like disciplining, but the words don't come. So netzach is the first step going from emotion to behavior. When we ask God for blessings, we daven, we're not asking him to love us. We're not asking him to know what our problems are. We assume he knows, and we assume he loves us. Because if he didn't, well, there's not much to talk about. If he doesn't know us and he doesn't love us, where do you go from there? So we know he knows us, he knows our problems, and he knows our pain, and he cares. So why the need for davening? The need for davening is to create a channel between the emotion and the performance. God loves us, but that has to be translated into God's doing something, acting on his love. So we find certain prayers that say, we are your children, how can you stand by? We're not asking to be his children, we are his children. But to facilitate, to smooth the path that goes from emotion to doing, to performing, that's what the prayer is for. So if we give it a little thought, we have a week to think about it, next week, this coming week. How do we get our good intentions to become good actions? How do we get our good feelings to translate into action? Sometimes we're told that if you really meant well and you wanted all the right things, God will consider it as if you did it. But Chassidus, the Tanya, explains something interesting. What does it mean to consider it as if you did it? If you didn't do it, you didn't do it. Meaning well, having good intentions, is beautiful. It doesn't compare to doing well. I think I once heard a quote from, in the name of Abraham Lincoln, I think, who said, well done is better than well said. You can present an argument really brilliant, it's correct, it's convincing, it's well said. But it's not as good as well done. You did well. So how can the Torah say that if you mean well, God will consider it as if you did it? So the Tanya explains that first of all, that only applies to when you couldn't do it. Good intention means you wanted to do it and you weren't able to. A chassid in jail in Russia wants to put on tefillin, but they won't give him his tefillin. In that circumstance, the desire to do the mitzvah and not being able to do it because of circumstances beyond your control, then God considers it as if you did it. But if you only thought to do it without the intention to do it, and the reason you didn't do it is laziness or indifference or whatever, then of course the good intention is not considered as if you did it. The other thing that Tanya says, it's not that God considers it as if you did it. If your intentions are sincere and real, God will arrange it so that you can do it. He'll make it possible for you to do it. So God connects the action to your feeling, not by simply making believe that you did it. He connects the action by making the action possible. He brings you to a place where you can do what you intend to do. Sitting here alone, haven't left the apartment in, 4 weeks. There's something very useful and very helpful. The previous Rebbe writes that he was in jail, in prison, under the communists. It was horrific. The mistreatment, the beatings, it was horrific. Whenever the Rebbe would mention his father-in-law in jail, he would choke up. It was a horrible memory. But the previous Rebbe writes in his diary that for no money in the world would he be willing to go back to that state, to that prison. But at the same time, for no money in the world would he give up a minute of the experience that he had while he was there. So nobody wants it, but if you have it, there's something precious about it. And I forget the exact words and description that the Rebbe gave, but something about the quiet, the lack of activity, the lack of options. It causes you to focus in a way that we hardly ever do. You become aware. When you block out all other thoughts, where do your thoughts go? What do you notice? So some people sitting in jail will notice how miserable they are, how unhappy they are, how frightened they are, and other sensations. The Rebbe noticed holy things, powerful things, because there's something about the quiet or the isolation that brings things into focus, makes things clear. So being quarantined, of course, you have to focus on your family and on your relationship, but there's so much quiet time. You become aware of parts of yourself, things in yourself that you were completely unaware of, never noticed. Some of it is good, some of it not so good. But it's good to know, to borrow a phrase. It's good to know what's not good too. It's good to have an honest and frank assessment of oneself. Makes you feel like you're standing on 2 feet. I know what's right, I know what's wrong, so I know where I stand. I know what needs to be increased, I know what needs to be decreased, what I should do more of and what I should do less of. Now I've got 2 legs to stand on. So I almost dread to think that we might go back to normal. Normal doesn't seem so attractive anymore. What we used to do, what we filled our days with, is just not appealing. It's not impressive. We're now aware of something deeper and better and higher, and we don't want to go back to the old stuff. Yeah, there's this bumper sticker. Imagine world peace. Imagine. Visualize. And it's easy to talk about world peace. And who doesn't want world peace? But can you even imagine what it would be like? Or is it so out of the norm, so otherworldly, it's hard to imagine a world at peace as much as we want it. So just being able to visualize, just being able to imagine world peace takes us a giant step towards peace. If we could just imagine it, it's like so many things in science fiction that became real. So we have to start with the fiction and then work our way towards the reality. The fiction means the imagination. Can you imagine yourself better? Can you picture it? A person decides, I'm going to be better, I'm going to be kinder, I'm going to be more available, I'm going to spend more time. And then you start to think about it, you say, wait a minute, I can't do that. I can't imagine that. I can't see myself that way. And that's what blocks my good intentions from becoming reality. If I could just wake up better, that would be perfect. Like some people say, this process of getting married, whoa, too painful. I wake up married, I would be very happy. But the process, So do I want to be married? Yes. Do I want to get married? I can't imagine. So what is the gulf between what I feel and what happens? My ability to visualize, my ability to imagine it. I can't imagine being so good. I can't imagine being so devoted, spending so much time. I should, but I don't know myself that way. The self that I know doesn't do that. So I can't imagine becoming that. So it's our imagination that can either block us or help us apply the emotion to reality, the theory to reality. So when we talk about it, we learn about it, it becomes more visual. We can start to see it. I can see myself spending more time. I can see myself doing more studying. It's becoming real. That enables me to take the next step and actually do it. So this quiet time is a time for imagination. And not fantasy. To imagine being what I want to be, to imagine the people I'm living with, the people I deal with, my neighbors, to imagine them in the way that I should be seeing them. The fact that I don't see them that way means I need the imagination to introduce me to that new possibility. Parents who can imagine their children grown up have a clearer picture of how to raise their kids. They know what the end result should be, makes it easier to create a path to something concrete. If I'm not sure what I want them to be, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do because I don't know where I want them to end up. I can't see them being this, I can't see them being that, so just a limit of our imagination. And of course, same is true with ourselves. Very often people will say, 10 years ago, if you had suggested that I would be doing what I'm doing now, or I would be the kind of person I am now, I would never have believed it. We have limited imagination. So quiet time kind of opens up that place where you can imagine. Can you imagine that? You can imagine that. Once you can imagine it, it's within reach. When you can't imagine it, So I'm really enjoying this, seeing things very differently, and all sorts of possibilities start to open up. In some way, I got to think, in some way, I'm being more productive now than I was when I could run around and travel, and or maybe it just feels that way. But when we cut down on our needs, we do become more productive. If I don't need as much, I end up doing more. When I need stuff, it distracts me. So, what is that somebody called the tyranny of choice? You walk in, a child walks into a toy store. It's horrible, but it does to the child. So many choices. It blows your circuits. Like, what am I going to buy first? What do I focus on? I can't focus. There are too many things. So we live a life in which the options, the number of choices, the things we could do drives us crazy, even as adults. And I used to go fishing, canoeing with groups of people. We would go out into the pristine preserves on the border between Minnesota and Canada. We would go out for a week, for the weekdays. We wouldn't spend Shabbos out there, but from Sunday to Thursday. And I kept getting headaches. So I asked a doctor who was on the trip. He says, when do you get the headaches? I said, when we're out on the lake, on the river. He says, try keeping your eyes on the canoe. Focus on the canoe. The headache comes from looking out into the distance and nothing to focus on. When your eye finds nothing to focus on, it can create a headache. When we have too many options and you can't focus on a particular item, it's not healthy. So children today are climbing the walls because of the endless variety of possibilities. It's hard for them to focus because we're introducing them to too many things and exposing them to too many things at the same time, and they don't know what to look at first. So toy stores are a terrible thing for children. You know, some of them are closing down. You don't take a child to a toy store. At best, you buy 3 toys, bring them home, ask the child which one he enjoys, and return the other 2. Limited choices is much healthier than endless choices. And somebody wants to explain that that's what the 10 Commandments are. Why 10 Commandments? There are 613 mitzvahs. What's with the 10? So he explained it like this. A human being is intelligent. A human being is imaginative, inventive, creative. You come into life. What do you do first? Where do you go? Where do you start? God says, you're going to go crazy. So let me at least give you some definitions, some borders, marked borders, so that there is something to focus on, and you don't have this endless, indistinct picture of a world of possibilities, but nothing real. So, first of all, I'm God. No other gods. Get focused. There's one God, not many. That is like, look at the canoe. Don't look off into the horizon where there's nothing to focus on. Then honor your parents. Focus on who's close to you. And then don't even think about killing. Don't even think about stealing. Don't even think about committing adultery. There are not endless possibilities and everything is possible. That message is so unhealthy. You tell your children, you can be anything you want. That is not helpful. Notice a child's talent and encourage the development or the cultivation of that talent. Don't say you can be whatever you want. First of all, it's not true. And even if it were true, it wouldn't do us any good. We wouldn't know where to begin. We'd be overwhelmed by what somebody called the tyranny of choice. It paralyzes you, makes you ineffective. Once you have a definite goal, and the more definite the better, you're more likely to succeed. So God says, you're going to wonder whether I should commit adultery, whether I should kill this guy, whether I should steal that stuff. Don't. No stealing, no adultery, and no killing. Now you've got some definite items to work with. Some possibilities have been eliminated. That's a good start. Now you have at least the basics for sanity. And then, of course, there were more restrictions. It's not just don't work on Shabbos, don't work on Pesach. Don't work on Sukkot, don't work on Yom Kippur. So the more specific we can get, the more focused we are, the healthier we are, and the more successful we'll be. So eliminating possibilities is a very healthy thing to do. We do it in business all the time. You got to know what you're selling, how you're selling it, who you're talking to, who your customer base is. You got to be focused. The more focused, which feels like restricted, who's your demographic? Don't talk to people who are not going to buy your product. Don't just run out in the streets and sing praises or advertise your service. Talk to the people who are in need of your service. So the 10 Commandments don't take away your freedom. They liberate you to function in a healthy, successful way. Anyway, I hope you're enjoying this quiet time, even though it's getting to be a little long, but every minute of it is good. It's healthy. It's healing. So we'll come out of this healthier, wiser, more mature, more focused. We now know what it takes to have a good world. We've seen it. We've seen what destroys the world. And the picture of The political scene, it is so horrifying. Horrifying. Nothing can get people to focus on what's important. Not even a plague. Oh, I just want to tell you this. I've been saying that the people who passed away in this month don't need Kaddish said for them, unlike most people who pass away, depend on the Kaddish to smooth the path. Someone sent me a page out of a holy book, Shevet Musar, where he actually says, a person who dies from a plague, all their sins are forgiven. They go straight to heaven. And he gets into graphic details. He says part of the reason that their sins are forgiven is because, to some degree, all death erases sin, some sin. But particularly when you die from a plague, the degradation, the isolation, not having anybody near you because they're afraid to come close. So you're alone, you're ignored, your needs are not met, you're really diminished terribly in your dignity and in your needs and in your self-worth. He really describes it in graphic detail and says, as a result of that, all your sins are forgiven. Which kind of leads to the conclusion, if all your sins are forgiven, you don't need Kaddish. You don't need a lot of people coming to your funeral. Usually, a lot of people coming to the funeral speaks well of the person as they're making their way into heaven. Look how many people were affected by him. Look at all those people at the funeral. It speaks well of him. It argues in his behalf that he deserves to go to heaven. Some people don't need that. Like Moshe, for example. Nobody went to his funeral. Nobody. He went up the mountain. Nobody knows exactly where. Nobody saw him pass away. He disappeared. He didn't need a funeral. People who passed away in this plague don't need a funeral. Don't need Kaddish. Don't need eulogies. It's pretty amazing. But I think it works a little differently. It's not that the person suffers so much that brings him forgiveness and all his sins are erased. I think people have to deserve having their sins erased, not from suffering. So it's not that because no one came to their funeral and they feel so terrible about it that their sins are forgiven. No, nobody came to their funeral because the sins have already been forgiven. You don't have to say Kaddish because they're already forgiven. And therefore, they don't need the Kaddish, they don't need the funeral, they don't need you to be there. So it looks like it's a terrible indignity. But that's only looking with the physical eye. There's a story in the Gemara about sages, holy, righteous people, and the distinctions between them. Yeah, they're not all on the same level, although they're all pure, innocent, holy. And the Gemara tells us that there was one of the sages who was surrounded by his colleagues as he was on his deathbed. They were all there, and yet at the last moment, a wall of fire came down and surrounded him, isolating him from his colleagues, because he was on a different level of holiness. There's something good about isolation. Some people don't need the support of others in their last moment. Most people are desperate for support. Those last moments are highly significant, and every detail matters, and who is there, and it can be very comforting and assuring. But some people don't need that. They would love to have it, but they don't need it. There's something special about those souls. And if we look around, there is something eerie about the quality of the people who have passed away. They seem to be the best of the best. So we are witnessing something that needs a lot of study and explanation because it's so unusual. It's so Mashiach-dik. So watch what's going to happen now. You may have heard this already many times from me. The mixture of good and evil is going to get sorted out. Evil is going to become so blatantly evil, it'll be ridiculous. Because without some goodness, evil is ridiculous. It's so empty, it's so non-substantial that it just has to dry up and blow away. It can't go on. So as it becomes more and more blatantly evil, the less chance of it surviving or continuing, which is good news. And then goodness, just like God is hidden in nature, in this gullus world, all forms of goodness are hidden. You can walk past a Rebbe and not notice anything special. Why? Holiness is not obvious to our eyes. God is not obvious. Holiness is not obvious. You walk past a mezuzah, doesn't impress you. So part of the process leading to Moshiach is that holiness will become visible. Goodness will come out of hiding. Nothing will conceal it. So when you see goodness, it will be wow. And when you see evil, it'll be like, you got to be kidding. That's how the world becomes godly. When the evil has nothing left to say for itself, it's just completely meaningless. And when all goodness starts to become visible. So good stuff is going to be coming from places we didn't expect because it was hidden. And bad is going to be coming from places we didn't expect because it's going to be exposed. And in that way, the world is becoming perfect. I guess the process is happening within us too. You're noticing things about yourself that just can't go on, has no justification. And you're noticing things about yourself that pretty good. Never noticed. So the scary thought is Is Mashiach going to come before I get a chance to do something good? Will Mashiach come without my contribution, without my participation? That's a scary thought. And the Rebbe, who was so devoted to us, was anxious about our lack of participation. He wanted everybody to be able to say, I did my share. And he worked so hard, came up with so many fantastic ways to help everybody, no matter how much they know or how little they know, how righteous they are, or how sinful they are. Everyone now is called upon to do one thing: bring God down to earth. That's it. If you do that, you're on the right page, you're with the right company, you're good. Even though in everything else you may not be good. So we definitely should take advantage. If there's still 5 minutes left before Mashiach comes and fixes everything, you have 5 minutes to do some good, to increase the holiness of the world, to diminish the pain in the world, and then you can say, I helped bring Mashiach. That would be wonderful. And of course, you are doing it. But there's no limit to goodness. So every minute that we still have before the coming of Mashiach, we should take advantage of it. We should feel an urgency. Time is running out to get your contribution in. And I'm not talking about money or only money. Contribution means whatever way you can add goodness to the world. It's scary, exciting. So one time, one minute, I'm feeling like, oh, forget my contribution. Let Mashiach come already. And the other moment, you feel like, what? And I don't have to do anything? That doesn't make any sense. So Moshe was demanding that Jews be taken out of Egypt. And God said, soon. There's just a few more things that have to happen. Good things. And Moshe was saying, forget the good things. Let's just get out of here. God said, but I promised Abraham that you're going to leave with a great wealth. And Moshe said, oh, skip the wealth. Just get us out of here. And God said, you're going to go with the wealth. What is the wealth? The goodness that we've accumulated. So sometimes I feel like, what are we waiting for? People are suffering. Just let Mashiach come already. Whatever good we'd have waiting for us, we'll do without it. I'll pass. Just bring Mashiach. And on the other hand, God says, we've come this far. So there was a very wise chassid. When I was in yeshiva, when I was first discovering Chabad, he was the elder statesman. He was the ancient old chassid. He was like in his 70s. That was considered ancient back then. Anyway, he was a very, very wise man. Shrewd, brilliant, strong. Anyway, so he would tell this lesson in life. He would say, sometimes a person comes in to talk to you and they sound perfectly intelligent. They make a lot of sense. You ask them a question, they answer. They ask a question, it's a good question. You give them an answer, they hear it, they get it. Perfectly intelligent, normal human being. And then the conversation is over and he gets up and he walks out the room and he slams the door like a Michiganer. He says, as I'm getting older, I'm wondering, I'm worrying. I did good, I lived well, I did what I was supposed to do, but in the last minute, as I'm leaving, I don't want to slam the door like a Michiganer. I don't want to go out crazy, undoing all the good that I had accomplished. So you don't just fade away. You got to go out the door like a mensch, just like you lived like a mensch. So that was his description of old age. I'm just worried that I'm going to close the door on life with a slam that will show that I was not as normal as I thought I was. So God is saying, I know you're anxious, I know you're impatient, you want Mashiach to come, but you know, we've come this far. Can't slam the door like a Michiganer. Like that character on Seinfeld where he walks in the door or out the door. So the closing act has to be at least as good as the rest of the show, if not more dramatic, better, end on a high note. Impatience is not the right word. It's not the right feeling at this point in history. So I want to thank you again for enabling me to do what I do, for doing what you do, and for being a positive force in the world. Not wait for goodness to happen, make it happen. Don't just feel bad, feel $2 worth of bad. It's a privilege. I think we have to ask ourselves why we are the lucky ones. Some people don't know. They're not involved. They don't get it. They're not. Maybe some grandmother, some pious woman in our ancestry is pulling strings for us, because we do have a privileged position. And we should be very grateful and we should be humbled by it.